The question is, should you choose chicken over beef? Yes, you don't want a lot of beef necessarily just because it's associated with higher levels of cholesterol compared to chicken. So that's why you want to limit consumption of a lot of beef in that regard. Now, I will say this, okay? If you do consume a high amount of chicken, you can have just as negative health outcomes as you can eating meat, okay, red meat, beef. So it just depends on how much you are consuming of these things. So just because white meat, chicken is generally considered more healthier, if you do consume a lot of it, it can have just as negative health outcomes as you can eating 2 to 6.5 ounces of red meat with your meals. So
With certain oils, does it matter like what form that kind of stuff can come in?
you want to choose more liquid. And you choose more liquid because it's obviously not solid, like the solid fats, like we just saw. When it's liquid at room temperature, it has not a lot of saturation to it. It's the saturated fats that tend to congeal, and those will be the ones that have a lot of energy packed into them. So that's why you don't want to choose those. Choose one of the liquids, choose one of those oils. And we'll get into kind of the profile of some of those a little bit. Well, I won't ask you to know all of them, and we'll look at it in the next unit when we start looking at the macros and when we start looking at lipids and fats. So, we'll see kind of the breakdown of saturated to unsaturated fats that are found in some of these and why some of them are considered better. It's generally because they have much more greater amounts of unsaturated fats, which are associated with a lot more positive health outcomes. Saturated fats, much more detrimental, associated with a lot more negative health outcomes. And so we'll dive into that more in the next unit when we start looking at the specific macros themselves. So here are these dietary guidelines. These are things that are put on. These are things that are potentially altered. What would be altered? Probably more serving sizes now. They're supposed to be revised every 5 years, okay? And why are these dietary guidelines necessary? They are there to give recommendations for eating, how much, how little of certain nutrients that you should eat, how much activity you should be getting. And again, it looks at, all the data, all the data that gets collected. Every time you go to a doctor, data gets entered into a system. This major system is what we use to see, okay, this person says they exercise, 5 minutes a week, and these are all the nasty negative health outcomes. This person exercises 55 minutes. He doesn't have, or she doesn't have, all these negative health outcomes. So, now we need to figure out how much minimum to not have all these negative health outcomes. So they take all that information, put it into what is called the dietary guidelines for Americans. And, it'll change its name from 2020 to 2025, and 2025, it'll change from 2025 to 2030. Okay. So we usually just refer to it as the dietary guidelines for Americans. And it's really for everything. Okay. It follows across the entire lifespan. That healthy eating pattern across the lifespan that we talked about in chapter 1. This is what this dietary guideline is doing. It's putting into practice what you should be eating, how much activity you should be doing, the types of activities you can do, and what that means for, infancy, from 1 to 3, from 3 to 5, from 6 to 10, from 10 to 12, from 13 to 18, adult, older adults. So all that stuff. So that's what that is. Some of the highlights here in terms of just nutritional stuff, we want to get stuff from all 5 food groups and oils. Okay. Again, the My Plate visualization allows you to easily look and go, okay, I have that on my plate. I'm fantastic. I should be healthy, hopefully. Limit your saturated fats. Okay. We just talked about that with the oils. Those are associated with more negative health outcomes. Limit your trans fats. Those have no discernible positiveness associated with them at all. So you want to have them as limited as possible. They do exist in most everything. So the goal is to try to limit as much as you can. Added sugars. If sugar exists naturally, fantastic. If it's fructose, fantastic. Fructose is associated with really no negative health outcomes. If you're eating a lot of fructose, if you're eating a lot of fresh fruits, you're eating a lot of fructose. There is really no associated negative health outcomes associated with eating a lot of fruit. Go ahead, do it. It's when we add it excessively in there. Why they would do that? For the processing of it, sometimes to get it to sit on a shelf for 6 to 8 months. They'll add sugars to it. So you want to limit the amount of added sugars you get. It's on the food label, and that's a little bit later in this lecture. And then sodium. Sodium is a huge nutrient of concern. So that's what they put in the guidelines to try to limit that amount of sodium. What can you do to help with these food choices? There's a couple simple things you can do. One, eat more whole wheat bread instead of white bread. It is a little bit healthier for you in the grand scheme of things. Bread is kind of expensive right now, okay, for whatever reason. So it is something that can be an issue for some individuals who have limited incomes. You know, eating overnight oats, stuff that you can cook on the stovetop, those type of oats, having fruit with that instead of, I don't know, what's a cereal that you pour milk on? Name one. Lucky Charms. There you go. Cookie Crisp. I don't even know if they still make those anymore. I don't really eat a whole lot of ready-to-eat cereals.